Who is Robert Connell Clarke?
He's been called the godfather of cannabis botany.
The author of Marijuana Botany, which has been the Bible for generations of growers, along with the evolution and ethnobotany of cannabis.
The man who traveled the world collecting landrace strains before it was cool.
Co-founder of the first legal cannabis seed bank.
A scientist, an ethnobotanist, and a storyteller of the plant.
He helped bring cannabis out of the shadows and into science. And today, we get to sit down with the man who helped write the book.
We're Jug Dealers, we're the podcast you need in your feed. Teaching the game like you never seen. Jerin, Gabe, GRAMBO, true OGs. Masters of the growth, set your mind free. From Denver, Colorado, where the deck is green. We set the data points for the SOPs. Jug Dealers Podcast, yes indeed.
Hey, everybody, welcome back to the Jug Dealers Podcast, where we discuss all things cannabis and lifestyle related, brought to you by the good people at 5A, and as always, available at jugdealers.net and jugdealers.net/samples.
Samples. So yeah, you can definitely go to the samples page as well. We have it really smooth and nice at this point. We smooth things out.
We've tried to smooth it out as much as possible.
I'm not saying that it's a perfect package, but we do have 3 packages available. Pick your package, pay the shipping and handling. Boom, it's on the way. You're not having to wait, anything like that. You will hear from one of us too, making sure that everything's good.
Or you
get that kind of personal touch as well.
Or you can just buy the gear.
You can also just buy the gear.
We've had some people who were just like, I didn't feel like waiting. I just bought the gear.
You can just buy the gear. It is all available. Jugdealers.net. Shop. Jugdealers.shop.
That's shop.
It's there. You'll find it. Use the tabs. Also, if you do have any general questions, there's a comment section as well. That comes right to me.
Commercial
if you're talking
stuff.
about, commercial stuff, any commercial samples, come and get them. You got definitely.
By the time this is filmed, we've actually been back and forth from South Dakota.
Yes, that is true. We will have been back and forth from South Dakota. Shout out to Bad River Cannabis in Fort Pierre, South Dakota.
Might even have some footage from that.
Yeah, we probably will. We might even do an episode, at least a part of an episode. But for now, and very specially, I actually had the opportunity to, and we kind of mentioned this about in one of the other podcasts we just did, but the opportunity to last minute, I got the call for an opportunity to go to Amsterdam and interview a very, very special guest. I was honored to do so, and we can finally actually drop the. And you
guys were there to kind of honor Skunk Man Sam as well.
That's true. That was
true. I mean, it wasn't just one thing.
No, it was like, this whole different people coming together for that situation. Me and Mr. Jingles were hanging out, sitting right next to each other. So it was really a special opportunity, and honestly, big shout out to Jair.
He made this happen.
He made this happen. But without further ado,
this was a could not say no.
This is a could not say no, because I got the opportunity to not just sit down for a brief interview. I got to hang out for 3 days and, really just kick it. But I got to interview Robert Connell Clarke. And that was truly an honor of mine.
I was
a dream.
So jealous.
It was a dream.
I was so jealous, bro. And you made a really good connection there. And, I saw the photos. It was funny because I said, you didn't really post a lot while you were over there. What was going on?
No, I didn't.
But I saw Jair post more than I saw you. But you got to hang out with some real legends.
Yep.
And reality is, for any of you who don't know who Robert Connell Clarke is, this is someone you really need to know about, because this is a guy who's been called the godfather of cannabis today. And reality is, it couldn't be more true,
Well, yeah, I mean, the reality is, it was an opportunity I couldn't say no to. And, I guess really without further ado, by the way, I got to do it on site as well. But I guess without further ado, Robert Connell Clarke. Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the Jug Dealers Podcast. We are here with a very special guest, and also in a very special place. If you can't tell by the backdrop here, we're in lovely Amsterdam, and I have the honor of interviewing Robert Connell Clarke today here in Amsterdam. So super excited about this. I really appreciate you taking the time to sit down. I know you are a very, very busy man. You've got some big projects that you're working on. I know you've got a new book that you're working on. I don't want to give too much away about that, but that's, you can talk about that here in a little bit. But we're going to attempt to do something that I kind of feel like is a bit of a monumental task, and that's attack, the work that you've done, which is extensive, and then also just talk about a bit about your personal journey, talk a little bit about genetics, talk a little bit about thin leaf, thick leaf, drug varieties, some of this indica sativa stuff that we like to talk about, and then obviously culture, some of the global stuff you've done, and then just where you think the scene's at today, etc. So I kind of wanted to start and do this almost in a little bit of a chronology type thing. And, but first, why don't you say a bit about yourself, a little bit about your background, where you come from, and then we'll go from there.
All right. I'm an ethnobotanist, really by training and by interest.
And could you actually define that real quick for our people?
Yeah, sure. Ethnobotanists study the relationships, the links between peoples and the plants they use. And that makes it a very broad subject, of course.
Sure.
There are a lot of plants and a lot of peoples, but I've specialized in the cannabis plant and all the different uses of it and all the different peoples who've been involved with it.
Which is extensive.
Yeah. It's enough to write books about.
Really big, thick, complicated books. So, I mean, I guess let's even just kind of start there. You're a Cali guy, right? You're from Southern California.
Yeah.
Went to Santa Cruz, right?
Yeah.
Banana slugs.
Oh, yeah.
He's a slug, folks.
Go
He's a slug. Go slugs. So, I mean, you're there. And I know you said originally you were looking at doing some agriculture stuff, whatever. It's not like you went to college going, hey, I'm going to get into cannabis.
No.
I'm assuming you were a cannabis user being where you were at,
Right.
Where you kind of ended up. What, at the end of the day, how did cannabis become such a big part of your life, and use that kind of a segue into kind of your education?
Well, I got into the science side of it. That's what's always interested me. I grew up as a junior scientist, I guess you'd say. I was always wanted to be an oceanographer, marine biologist in particular. And I went to university still with that sort of in mind. But I ended up at Santa Cruz, and they were just starting to have a marine biology department, but it wasn't like going to UC San Diego and studying at Scripps.
Sure.
Wasn't so in the cards. And I thought I would do something outdoor scientific kind of thing.
Right.
That's what my aptitude tests said. Remember those?
Oh, yeah. So you're like, okay.
Forestry, that was another possibility that seemed like, I like to backpack and all that. But I ended up turning on to weed in university, and that was part of the program in those days. This was the very early 70s. And I got a chuckle even from myself on that one. But it was a path, and science has always been the direction. It's always been the Tao for me to follow through life in general. I'm an empiricist.
That's your centering point.
Yeah, exactly. And that's what's been I followed the whole way, pretty much. In travels, research, everything.
So when you go to your advisor with your idea, it's the 70s. You're saying, hey, I actually want to study cannabis as a thesis project, as a dissertation. Like, I truly want to pursue this. What was the general feeling on that?
They thought it was a bit strange, but this is UC Santa Cruz. I mean, this was really a pretty experimental college in a lot of ways, at least for the UC system. It was sort of the freaky fringe, but still you had to have an idea and back it. So actually for me, it was super easy because this is a library project, like most of my writing still is. And I went to the library and I found Mark Merlin's Man and Marijuana.
Okay.
Which he had written at the University of California at Santa Barbara a few years before.
The Gauchos.
And a number of years before, actually. And that was his master's dissertation, if I remember correctly.
Okay.
So I had that checked out of the library, this lovely little hardcover. And I went, well, there is a precedent for this.
Right.
Other people have done this. This was the really ethnobotanical look at it. It was probably the first ethnobotanical thing I ever read too.
Sure.
Man and Marijuana.
Ethnobotany.
Right. And Mark's a professor today. He's still a professor in University of Hawaii, and he teaches ethnobotanically themed classes.
No kidding.
So that's our system. I really, I'm also a great fan of educational systems. And I think they produce people who can think logical fashion, which I really appreciate.
Right.
It's always helped me, and it's helped a lot of people. So
excellent. So obviously 1977, you finished your dissertation, right?
Yep.
And what was the exact title of it?
That was Botany and Ecology of Cannabis.
Okay. And that is what basically turned into this, right?
Yeah. 4 or 5 years later, that came out.
So yeah, this came out in 1981, folks. And this is still today, really one of the quintessential books. It was, I mean, just the thought of it coming out when it did, putting your name on it, not having a pseudonym. I feel like you were obviously very bold, and you self-published. Yeah. Originally your dissertation,
the
right?
dissertation I self-published. Yeah. And that was, with just a printer in Santa Cruz, 500 copies to start.
And so I find that just so ballsy. You're just like, whatever, I'm just going to, I did this and I'm just going to self-publish it.
Well, there was a High Times magazine already. Jim and Ed had already done the Marijuana Growers Guide. That's the same publisher.
Okay.
So there was a precedent there again.
Right.
I mean, I didn't.
Right. You didn't feel like you were the first guy.
No, they did. Ed used his real name and Jim had a pseudonym, but, I didn't see any reason for a pseudonym. This is science.
Right.
It's just about a certain plant.
Honestly, I love how you make it so simplistic, but let's be honest, that was pretty ballsy at the time.
It was different, but I didn't really think there was a market for these things. I mean, there was a High Times. They gave a little review and a few people ordered it. And I sent a copy to Playboy magazine. I also sent copies to all the tobacco companies, United.
Yeah, I'm sure they love that.
Everybody, just for the hell of it.
Yeah, why not?
Screw it. Let them know it's there. And I got highly fingerprinted copies back from, I remember from one of the tobacco companies, had photocopy dust fingerprints all over it. and a cover letter that said, "We're really not interested." And I was like, yeah, right. I wish I had that.
Oh, now that's a real piece of history, but I'm sure it shook you a little bit. Like, oh,
I was just like, wow, thanks, you guys. The only one that got returned, but I thought it was so silly.
The only one that got returned, but Playboy did put a piece of that down, right?
They put a little tiny, 16th of a page corner with a picture of the cover. And I got back from field tripping around California and I had a lot of orders. My postmistress was totally freaked out. I'd been away 3 or 4 weeks and she had a cardboard box of orders. And she lugs it up, puts it on. I live way out in the countryside in California. She was shocked. So was I. But anyway, I printed another 1,000 and that was that. That was all that were ever printed.
And so, and you're off and running that. So obviously this is a very limited copy, but it's back out on Amazon.
Well, that's not so limited. Thousands.
Oh, you're saying the dissertation was? Yeah,
that was just,
that's right.
They got self-published.
This is re-available on Amazon.
Marijuana Botany that's always been available. Hashish we're about to talk about is recently made re-available on Amazon. But Marijuana Botany is still in print. It's always been in print.
Good.
And it's still done by Ronin Press, and you can still order it on Amazon.
And obviously, for me, it's interesting because it is a botany book. It's not, hey, this is how you go and grow cannabis. This is how you go in your basement and grow cannabis. That's not the book. It's about the botany, the study of the plant itself, right? Tons of really cool stuff. I love all the air layering stuff you have in there. And did you draw all the stuff in there?
A lot of it, not all of it. No, some of it's done by some other people.
Which I was always impressed with as well. I mean, I don't have that touch. And it seems like, a lot of the original botany stuff obviously was all hand drawn. So the fact that somebody had to be really into plants, but then be able to render them as well, it's like you really had to be dual talented.
Well, that's how the old guys did it.
So speaking of hashish, obviously this is one that people really love to take a look at. Again, really dives into hash as a culture, where it comes from, how it's processed. Personally, my favorite picture, which I'm sure a lot of people are familiar with, is this one right here, with this massive collection of hash all over the world. Do you want to talk about that a little bit? How the heck did you put that together?
This is early Photoshop, and I didn't do it, but I looked over a friend of mine's shoulder when he did it. The pieces on the left, your left here, this is a poster.
Okay.
This poster came out Don't know exactly. It's not dated as I remember, but let's say 75.
Okay.
Somewhere in there. It was pretty early. I found it in a head shop here, but they had a bunch of them. They were selling them.
Right.
Here in town in the very late 70s. On the right, because of the one on the left, and that wasn't their background. That's the pieces of hash in exactly the same way they had them laid out. And they had a key, and that's their text.
Yeah.
It's all copied verbatim. And they had the key also for this. It was very scientifically done.
Sure.
Super nice. I always really liked this poster. So years later, when I wrote this book, I remembered that poster and dug it out and used that theme, made a new background with a piece of rough hemp cloth. So they were on a piece of hemp cloth, and then extended their background. And these are pieces I had or borrowed from friends.
Right.
They're not all mine.
And obviously at that time in Amsterdam, it's well known that, this is definitely a place where you could get hash from all over the world, all different kinds of and styles and et cetera. But yeah, I've always loved this picture. I understand why you fell in love with that poster as well and went back and dug it up. But I've always wondered about the story on that. Well, I mean, speaking of that, obviously, I know you did, well, quite frankly, you've traveled all over the world studying this plant, and speak on some things, maybe don't on others. But do you really remember the first time that a trip like truly blew your mind when it came to cannabis, when you went there and you said, how the hell did I end up here? I like,
yeah, a few times. I mean, it was always, it's always exciting to go see hemp fields, cannabis fields of any kind. But, what I've had the most access to recently has been hemp fields, basically not for drug purposes, but for fiber usually. And I really am interested in hemp textiles, traditional ones. So I've been to some pretty remote places. Hemp has been falling out of fashion for more than just my lifetime. So places in China, ethnic minority groups who still use hemp, those sort of adventures have been really interesting. But every time you see a hemp field, even if it's a small garden in some lady's house, it's like, there they are. There they are.
So you've never lost that fascination, that wonder. Yeah.
No, I still go see Monicia's French variety hemp fields around Europe. I get excited.
Right.
I want to see some outdoor hemp plants at least once every year.
Like
more than once, but
I gotta see that. I gotta see that every year. Well, let's transition a little bit more into a little more like the plant side itself, since that's kind of where we're going. Plant seeds, strains, things like that. I mean, and I do want to mention, but before that, now this really for me is
that's the tome.
This is the coup de grace right here. This is an absolute wealth of information, and I actually want to delve into just a couple of things. This is the first place that I ever saw somebody say, it's all cannabis sativa, the thin leaf, thick leaf drug variety, really being able to tie that back and really look at where things went back to genetically and where they tied into the current gene pool. The reality is, why don't we just delve into it? Indica versus sativa. What do you think about that? What is your take?
Well, I think languages get used for varying purposes to mean varying things at varying times. So, yeah, like all cultural elements, they're works in progress. The origin of the two words is that cannabis sativa, the genus and species name, most people feel that species name covers all the diversity of cannabis. So therefore it's monotypic. There's one species. Others have taken a view that there might be as many as three. And along the way, people have used all kinds of other names.
Sure.
That's what taxonomists do. They change the names of things and circumscribe different sized groups and look at relatedness between plants, in this case, and try to make conclusions based on that relatedness.
Yep.
Mostly how they look, particularly their flowers, similarities and differences in flowers. Those were the traditional taxonomic characters. And then chemotaxonomy came into it. It's another way of looking at classifying plants is their chemistry, with cannabinoids, terpenes, terpenoids, other aromatic principles that will be brought in the future. And now, of course, genomics.
Right.
So is the sequencing. So there's all kinds of different perspectives that as you alluded to when you introduced the book, my thing has always been the gene pools, the different biotypes, both in terms of how nature formed them and how human interactions form those gene pools for different uses. That's why you have distinctly different fiber groups, all those factors involved, but having distinctly different fiber groups, seed groups, drug groups. Then breeders got a hold of those basic gene pools, members of those, which are largely land races. There's some populations that have been used that were already feral, that already escaped from agriculture, possibly another subject, but wild populations, which may actually exist or not, but they're in any regard feral, and they're growing no longer with any human influence.
Gotcha.
Maybe land that was human influenced, but
at some point,
not with anybody growing them.
Sure.
So those are the basic gene pools we have. 4 of them that I see. That's based on Carl Hillig's work from Indiana University. And Mark and I basically use his structure in cannabis evolution and ethnobotany. So, and I still do. I think it's a good way to look at it. It takes into it. It's a practical taxonomy in a way, and it's not about what you call it. To me, it's about what it is.
Sure. What is it ultimately?
Yeah, and humans have shaped these gene pools, and nature has shaped these gene pools before and during the domestication process. So they're all really important to me. And then we took these and mixed them all together.
Right.
We humans.
Sure.
Oh boy, we mixed it up. Hemp breeders mixed Chinese with European varieties. She was the late 18th century, mid 17th century, even mid 1600s. People had brought Chinese and other Asian, probably other Asian, but certainly Chinese hemp varieties to Europe.
Interesting.
So there's always been a hybridization going on.
Well, and we also know this is something that's been traded through cultures for a long, long time. And one of the reasons that, that the word cannabis itself has stayed intact as a word in language, because, obviously slang terms change generation to generation very quickly. But if you and I don't speak the same language, it's rather important if we're trading something that we know what the hell we're trading, right? So I've always found that to be very interesting. But also, I know one of the things you've delved into is, modern cannabis and what's the genesis of modern cannabis? When did humans really start? Or what does even modern cannabis mean? Or what does it mean to you?
Well, there's a lot of different varieties. There's hemp varieties,
right,
bred for fiber. There's seed varieties bred for seed. They're entirely different. One you're after the stalk, the fibers in the stalk. Sure. The other you're the seeds in the flowers, which is not that much different from being after the resins in the flowers, except they're completely seeded, which is not the drug side. But yeah, there's been a lot of intentional breeding with fiber varieties and seed varieties too also, but they're a very narrow gene pool. At least our Western ones.
Sure.
The drug side really has just been a huge blending of the 2 drug gene pools, the indica and sativa. Sativa being the all-encompassing term, but now indica is a term that came along for varieties from India originally, and we had Carl von Linné, Swedish taxonomist, used the term cannabis sativa and popularized it first, and it's given the credit for it. That's pretty much his deal, but he didn't make up the word, but the phrase. But also then there was Lamarck, who came along, and he saw samples from India and named them thusly, and it just turned out that what Linné had seen and other European taxonomists is quite different from what came from India.
Sure.
But that wasn't what people think of as indica today. That's Afghan.
Right.
So see, all these gene pools are getting all mixed up right there in our lingo.
Right.
But sativa is now in the branding and the understanding of the smoking crowd. That favors the more narrow leaf drug types.
Sure.
Which also look more like hemp.
Right.
And
airier.
And that's the sativa side of things. And the indica side of things represents not the Indian ones that are also narrow leaf, narrow-leaf drug varieties,
Right.
but Afghan.
Right.
And that's the latest kid on the block,
Mm-hmm.
the big boy.
The big boy.
And yeah.
And so, I mean, how far can we trace back humans' interactions with cannabis? Like 10,000 years, 20,000 years, 30,000 years? I mean, it's got to be difficult because a lot of it's going to come out of the archaeological world, right? Because they're written language or things that are written on or only go back so far. And undoubtedly cannabis goes way earlier than that.
That's true. And there's a lot of evidence around, but archaeological evidence with cannabis is a bit tricky. Pollen is the most frequently found thing.
Interesting.
But cannabis' closest relative is humulus, the hop plant, which grows in largely the same kind of areas. There are some differences, arguably, but they look very much alike, so much alike. They can be differentiated with some statistical accuracy, but nobody did it, is the point. I mean, people just said cannabis humulus pollen or humulus cannabis pollen, or venture to guess, educated guess, depending on where they found the pollen, that was likely one or the other.
Right.
But in the circumstances, you find pollen on the bottom of a pond, it's likely they were redding hemp there, male hemp plants. So there's an accumulation of pollen.
Right.
And hop plants were also used for fiber, but very, very, very much less than hemp.
Sure.
So your odds are, of course, that's cannabis pollen.
Right.
That's the way they have to interpret these remains. Fibers, super difficult to tell, especially from archaeological remains. It's not that hard in a textile, but it's the kind of remains that really are reliable are seeds. Because a hemp seed's a hemp seed. They vary in size, but they really, in shape, look much the same. And hop seeds are same or similar, but obviously different.
Right.
To anybody who looks very hard. So seed remains are the ones that are most reliable. And the oldest seed remains are so far from Japan about 10,000 years ago.
Okay.
And that's from an archaeological habitation site. So assumption being that they were using them.
Sure.
But it was a single seed.
A seed.
Yeah. It wasn't like they found a whole bunch of them. So
Yeah.
Those kind of remains are rare. And of course, the closer you get to today, the more of those kind of remains there are.
Right. Well, I mean, obviously you've been, been around the world, seen a lot of different interesting things. What's the most unique strain or interesting strain that you've ever seen? Could be from a morphological standpoint, but could be I don't know. You've seen so many different things, probably things from 20 feet tall to, I don't know.
I think that's what's fascinating is that exactly that, the diversity.
Yeah.
I mean, the most interesting thing I saw recently is yesterday I saw ABC. Now, this is one of the weirdest things ever. It's Australian bastard cannabis. And this is I had never seen it before. I'd just seen a really fuzzy, bad picture of it.
Yeah.
So just a little plant of it, but it really doesn't look like cannabis at all. And that was fascinating. Just to finally see
something weird. I've seen
vegetated. It wasn't flowering or anything, but it has leaves that don't look like cannabis.
Right.
They're super reduced. They don't have any serrations. They're hardly even they have maybe 3 leaflets, so they're a little bit fused together. And they're tiny. It really it's bizarre.
The weirdest one I've seen is Freak Show in person.
Exactly. That's another one I should see.
That's just, it really is a freak show.
Yeah.
What's up with that? I mean, do you have any?
I have no idea about the genetics in the ADC. I need to delve into it more. I just had a passing association yesterday, and I said, whoa, that's weird.
That's interesting.
And I'd never seen it, but it got me thinking about things. But genetics-wise, breeding-wise, Freak Shows are just a homozygous recessive trait. It's a classic one. If you got 2, it's sort of recessive allele. So if you have doubles up in the offspring, so a quarter of a cross between.
So in other words, it would have been happening. People are just not they're going to look at that thing and think that's a freak show.
Yeah.
So they're going to select it.
I've not looked into this genomically. Maybe somebody out there can answer this question. I'm not a geneticist at all, but that same mutation has shown up in 2 places that I know of. in plants that don't normally have leaves that look like that. And one of them I'll mention first, because I just learned about this one, is blackberries. There are blackberry varieties that, not varieties so much, but they have been recorded. I have a photo from an article from the 50s, I think. It came from like a gardening magazine or something.
Crazy.
They have black and white photo, but it's a normal blackberry leaf in one of these. It's the freak.
It's the freak.
Absolutely. And the one that you've all seen, if you're gardeners, scented geraniums. You know, the geraniums have a almost round leaf usually, right? Scented geraniums have this really ramified,
no kidding,
wandering leaves.
Man, I'd love to have those. I'd love to have those.
A lot that's in there, you know. It's these lemon scented geraniums. I don't have one at home, but I've seen them.
Right, but they exist.
They are a geranium, and they have what I think is that same trait.
Interesting.
And I think I've seen it in Japanese maples too.
Okay.
In another version of the Japanese maple with the reddish leaves, it looks like a cannabis leaf anyway.
Yeah.
Beautiful thing, spreading, super nice.
It does have that. Yeah,
and even now in springtime, they're a fall color.
Yeah. Oh, well, great diversity in there too.
Yeah. They're around here quite a lot. So yeah,
seems like the kind of place they'd like to grow. All right, well, let's talk a little bit about landrace. I feel like this is a word that a lot of people like to throw around, and I think again, I totally agree with you in that I don't think it's that people are intentionally wrong when some of the wrong nomenclature is used. It becomes standard vernacular within the community. But I do think, it's something that needs to be cleaned up a bit. Some things are never going to go away, but how would you explain landrace in simple terms? Yeah,
I'll get the part just about this terminology.
Okay.
It's about branding.
Yeah.
That's people grab these words for branding purposes. Great. People should get the word around. That's great. But that immediately gives words a very narrow perspective. I mean, sativa and indica, back to that for a moment. It's now more about the high.
Sure.
It's more racy, or it's more like a narrow leaf drug variety would be. It's really become far from what those terms originally meant, which is fine, but it's not even about the plant anymore.
Right.
It's about the effect.
Yes.
And that's strictly a product of trying to explain the differences between them, because there are differences. It's not imaginary.
No, they're not imaginary.
But trying to put a handle on it. Okay?
Right.
So landrace the word landrace has very quickly become a branding ploy, even in a lot of ways.
I hear you.
Land races are the roots of everything we have. You know, it's
the base.
The base. Maybe some feral populations thrown in there, as I mentioned too, but they're land races. And a land race is the product of, as we already spoke about, nature. You know, the natural selective process that goes on anywhere, with or without humans, in concert with human selection.
Right.
The farmers saving the best seeds. Okay. That's the beginning of domestication and breeding.
Yeah.
Eventually. Breeding is the next level because you're being intentional about the choice of parents.
Sure.
Usually with land races, for anything, it's selecting the best seed parent.
Right.
Whether they're self-pollinated like wheats, things like that, or cross-pollinated like maize, or very cross-pollinated like cannabis. But,
sure. And obviously some of the importance in a land race is, obviously, for example, if there's a problem in potatoes, where do you go? You go to Peru because that's the genetic pool, right? So understanding that the place of origin, in even this narrowing of the gene pool, is that our only opportunity, is to go back to the bases and because we have narrowed it. I mean, with all the hybridizations that's going on, there's been a lot of stuff that's been lost in cannabis genetics.
That's for sure. We've done a major intercrossing homogenization of part of the cannabis gene pool.
And I think that's a big part of it.
It's just part of it. The whole hemp side of it's had its own narrowing of its gene pool,
sure,
which is a different but also fascinating story.
Sure.
And it, with the drug side, the Sinsemilla, modern day Sinsemilla gene pool, which is a really hybrid mess, but
right. Yes. And this is one of the things I wanted to talk about.
That will continue to be sorted out by people who are working with it.
Okay.
But you can't take it back to all of its constituent parts.
Right. And that's the thing. Once you lose some of those genetics, how do you even get them back? I mean, that's part of genetic preservation in all plants, right? That's why we have seed banks. That's why we have these things.
Exactly right. You know? That's a theme in having a future.
Right.
Also. Right. And cannabis has not been included in the major gene banks very much.
No, which is interesting.
There are government ones that have a lot of accessions. The Chinese have a large gene bank, which I just learned about. The West, during the war on drugs, we lost a lot of the germplasm we had because it was either deemed useless or dangerous.
Right.
So a lot of collections were purged during the 70s, I mean, relatively recently. So that's kind of a bummer. But the genetic preservation is important, and we have a lot of diversity still.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, on the drug side too, and you can still do what was only done. You know, the whole process was only begun in the 70s of making these modern varieties, and it was done without intent. It was done through scientific curiosity. And it was done in people's gardens, but they just either accidentally or on purpose made seeds and then planted those seeds the next year. Hey, that's the process started.
Right. Well,
but only recently. So,
and you even mentioned, I thought yesterday, I never really heard about this, but like society and government being a selection pressure even. And you know what I mean? How that even, the attitude towards cannabis actually being a selection pressure, or even certain things like, I don't know, we were talking about, roadkill skunk yesterday. Well, for a lot of people, it was dangerous to grow. It was too smelly, and so like that was a selection pressure.
Now it's fondly remembered.
It's like, hey, give me the roadkill back, Well, and obviously with commercial breeders, so-called commercial breeders, and actually you've worked with real commercial breeders. A lot of people call themselves breeders, but, and by the way, pollinating something without intent is completely fine and fun, and seeds are fun, but breeding has intent. Breeding has a goal. Otherwise you don't have a centering point. So I'll just get that out of the way. You know what I mean?
It's very true.
But as far as, commercial breeding, and actually, your friend Dave Watson, right? So that's somebody that you worked with. Speaking of some of the landrace stuff, hortifarm, some of that stuff. Do you want to speak a little bit about that, where you guys came across each other and some of that? Some of that history?
For those of you who don't know, David passed away recently.
Yes, he did.
He was really a pioneer in this whole field. But we met in Santa Cruz, so a long time ago. And longer than I care to count at the moment.
Right. Yeah, no need to
anyway, a long time ago. So we're old friends, and we worked together on things here in the Netherlands for years. That was Hortifarm, essentially. And the International Hemp Association, that's another one that David thought of and we worked on together. But always playing both sides of it. That David also is a person who is interested in the cannabis plant, the whole ball of wax, all the different uses. And he was always really supportive of my textile passions. He's one of the people who got me started with collecting stuff. So, in that regard, I owe him a big one. But we worked here. We worked originally with Hortifarm's intent was to develop single cannabinoid varieties.
Single cannabinoid variety.
Originally starting with THC, not other cannabinoids in there. And that was a low hanging fruit, but also with CBD and other minor cannabinoids. And that's where the selfing came in.
Got you.
We were, didn't invent it, but we were among the first to utilize the silver nitrate.
Really?
Reversal of plants and making soft lines.
And is that just tech that was obviously being used somewhere else in horticulture? Said, hey, let's try it on.
It wasn't even used that much in horticulture, but it had been scientifically proven.
Okay.
And there were peer-reviewed papers by Indian researchers actually from the maybe even as early as the 60s, but certainly the 70s.
Right.
There.
Right.
And there were other research showing other ways of doing it. That's just the technique that won.
Right.
And the one that we published about it. And then it went on to become popular with much more recently with making the all-female varieties that are so popular today.
Sure.
Just a brief explanation. Females are XX in cannabis plants and males are XY. This is the same as humans and all mammals and other animalian organisms.
Sure.
But it's very rare. No, it's not diploid. It's sex control. But
Okay.
I'm XY, you're XY, your wife's XX. That's rare in plants. It's actually super rare. It's about 5% of flowering plants are XY sexual inheritance.
Really?
There's only 4 other genera that contain these that anybody's ever heard of.
Right.
And a couple other real oddball ones. But so that's real minority. Then you have wind pollination.
Right.
Okay. Wind pollination is in less than 10% of flowering plants.
Less than 10%.
Yes. And none of the other genera are wind pollinated that are, that's not quite true. X and Y sexual inheritance leads to wind pollination. Okay, let me explain that. Because the sexes are separated. They're on separate plants.
Right.
And it's dioecious.
Dioecious, right.
Okay, so dioecious leads to wind pollination. But that said, less than 10% of plants are wind pollinated. So you have this group of plants, Cumulus also, its cousin. And those two are XY inheritance. Those two are slightly different in their XY inheritance, but still XY. And they're wind pollinated. And they're dioecious. And as a result of it, wind pollinated.
right.
So they're rare. These just as two major reproductive traits in a plant are super rare. So that's kind of intriguing, you know. Cannabis happens to be one of this very rare little thing.
Right. And obviously everybody, you know, I've always kind of made the argument like, hey, it is a special plant, but it's also a C3 photoperiodic plant. There's others, but now I might be believing something a little bit different, people. Maybe it is a little more special than I originally accounted for.
It's just an odd one. That was just
but that's an oddity. Yeah. Well, speaking of, you know, Dave really being a plant man, and honestly, it's something that, you know, the people that are doing the best work are the people that really have the passion for the plant, are stewards of the plant. I always make the joke that we're not growers, we're plant janitors, right? Yeah. Because we don't grow shit. They're you know, they're autotrophs, we're heterotrophs. Right. They make their own food. If it wasn't for them, there is no us, right? So like looking at it from that standpoint, and I do love the Michael Pollan, who's controlling who kind of thought process behind plants, because reality is, I truly believe they are controlling us on some level. But obviously you have spent time, you know, with a lot of traditional cannabis growing communities. What's something about their relationship with the plant that has really impressed you? And is there anywhere in particular in any community that you spent time in that you really just were impressed with their stewardship of the plant?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, to me, the fiber uses are the most intriguing in that regard, just because you have to grow the plant in a correct way.
Sure.
Like growing any crop for a specific end use. You adjust what you're doing based on that. But the whole process is really involved. I mean, getting the fibers out of the plant is a lot of different steps. You know, you have to have a cultural knowledge. You have to, your mom and grandma had to show you how to do it. Right.
This isn't just something that, and if that's lost, it's gone.
Yeah, exactly. Unfortunately. And also the varieties that they're growing are gone. That's the whole ethnobotanical relationship.
Right.
To have a landrace is no longer a landrace without the land. So as soon as you bring it here or bring it anywhere and grow it in a greenhouse or whatever, it's not really the same thing anymore. It's under your stewardship and it's your land, but it's going to change is my point. It's, you know, that's fine. You could still call it, it's still Indian, whatever, but, but it's now my Indian whatever, and the population sizes are really small. It's usually 2 or 3 plants at the most that make the next population. It's immediately taken a special turn.
No, you got me with that one.
Yeah, that's the way it works.
You got me with that.
So it's hard to leave names on things. And a plant like this, every time you cross your line with another male or something, it just became half the new thing. So there's a lot of dilution that goes on with these serial crosses. They're, you know.
Well, yeah. And I mean, and how do you think how has globalization changed cannabis? And obviously you yourself have worked around the world, but we're also sitting here watching very actively what's going on in the world, whether it's Thailand, Germany, what's going on in the US. I mean, this is something that I don't think any of us really thought would get to where it's at. And there's good and bad about that. Obviously, we can argue about that. I'm excited that the science end of things can be opened up a lot more.
Yes. The handcuffs are off for scientists, and you really see that. Again, it's my interest in ethnobotany gets right up to where politics takes over.
Sure.
And then I kind of,
and then you just
leave it up to the flow.
Yeah.
But, it's interesting to see what's going on, and quickly. And I think shockingly to me was so little forethought or direction. It's shocking, honestly. It really is. I can't believe that the straight world was taken so by surprise by all this. Obviously, nobody put any thought into this.
Right. And it's only people that with money ended up in control of it with no idea and no stewardship. And,
that's another subject. But that's where I just have to leave off.
Right.
But
right. I get it.
Where we've gotten so far is amazing, though. I mean, all this has happened under the radar.
Right.
This is what this new book's about. Largely, it's called. It won't be out for a while, y'all. I'm right in the middle of this.
Yeah, we're not pressing it yet, but give it a little taste.
Yeah, it'll come. It's called Cannabis Botany. I'll take off on obviously marijuana botany, but. Cannabis Botany 21st Century Advances is the subtitle. Cannabis
Botany 21st Century Advances.
Exactly. And it's about more recent research. This is 40 plus years old.
Right. So, and in all honesty, I kind of figured it was going to be a building, on this because this is just a great base. While I'm thinking about it, why 3 names? Did you want to set yourself apart? Did you think that Robert Clarke was?
Well, that's my middle name, and there are 100,000
Robert Clarke. Yeah, okay, so that's what I always figured.
Even with an E. I mean, no, really. That's very.
So I always got to figure.
I mean, Jim Smith is probably a little more common, but
not much. Well, it sounds like.
So I use my full name, but yeah.
So it sounds like and honestly, I love the fact that you've updated and also really are attempting to create the narrative through it, right? So it's
this book will always exist and it'll always be there. This is the basic botany, and this is what underlies the whole thing. That's why people still buy it after all these years.
Absolutely.
And it doesn't sell a zillion copies, but the information is pretty much the same. So this is the foundation, if you will, for the new book. But I'm going to take off from here. I mean, a lot has happened. This on many, many fronts. Okay. There's been really good science. It's come from all different directions. It's come from institutions increasingly because they also don't feel like they're under the gun.
Right.
It's come from the anti-drug warriors since the 70s, since before this book was printed. Science on the dark side, if you will, good science done for the wrong reasons, arguably.
Right.
But,
well, it's, good people break bad laws, right?
Yeah. It's been a struggle. But on the other side, on the news side, the side that was partly assisted by the information, basic knowledge in this book, is the under the radar prohibition research that went on.
Well, like we were talking about yesterday, and we talked about it on here before, the anecdotal data that really is part of our data in cannabis. That is it the whole thing? Well, no. And I love more science being brought in, but to me, it absolutely is a piece of the pie. And I think, it sounds like to me that when it comes to the globalization of cannabis, you believe that we've gained more than we've lost. Is that fair to say? Because of research opportunities and moving things around, or not? Or do you think it's the other way around?
I think we've lost some things, but I think we have an amazing future. We're just at the beginning of this game.
Right.
And we've come really far, really fast, and we've kind of cul-de-saced ourselves, shot ourselves in the foot a little bit too. I mean, the whole scene. Now it'd be nice if we had more diversity to go back to. I mean, hey, everybody who studies history as I do gets a bit sentimental, which is dumb. I mean, the essence of culture has changed. So if you think it's all good, all we have any moment is a snapshot, right? But it's a movie. It's going to go after we're all gone.
Right.
So
right. I mean,
it's you got to keep it, got to stay light on your feet a little bit, but it's never too late, certainly with any of this. So we have way more possibilities. I don't know how all these students now are who are writing master's dissertations and are really interested in cannabis and beyond. People with doctoral degrees in cannabis studies coming out. I hope they're all going to get jobs.
Well,
I mean, because then that'll mean we're really doing things with the plant.
Sure.
But the start is to get the education to be able to work with it. And that's happening right now in a big way. I pushed the envelope years ago, coming up with the ideas, doing just a library dissertation. But now people are doing frontline actual scientific research with the plant.
Right.
It's great stuff.
Right.
The other thing I don't tackle is the medical side. There's plenty out there. That's where the action really is. To research these things. But I'm trying to stick with the botany and the people around the botany. But yeah.
Well, you can only do so much. You know what I mean? You can only do so much. And
I can't write another super thick book or I'll never finish it.
Well, that's understandable.
Cannabis is a huge topic, y'all. I mean, if you want to study something, there's no single plant that offers more possibilities. And ethnobotany is a great path to take to studying any plant. And if you tie together geography with it, it's a big, wide open field.
So, you know what? I actually want to take this opportunity. I'm just going to read the definition of ethnobotany for our listeners because it's something that I thought really rang true to me.
It disagrees with my...
No, not at all. Ethnobotany is the interdisciplinary study of the relationship between humans and plants, focusing on how different cultures utilize plants for various purposes, including food, medicine, and shelter. It combines insights from botany, anthropology, and other fields to understand how plants are used, managed, and perceived by different societies. This is complex. This is
it kind of covers everything.
Well, which is what's kind of, mind blowing, the fact that you're basically taking these two things and to me, botany, culture, and
to me, it's the classic plant to demonstrate the concept of ethnobotany.
I couldn't agree more.
Plants would use so many different ways, by so many different people. So
do you think, with all the tech today and whatnot, and even with, all the terpenes and cannabinoids and flavonoids, do you think at times we're overcomplicating it? Do you think at times, again, it is a plant, it's, letting it do its thing, taking what's, the natural ratios and things like that. It gets weird when things start getting mixed up a lot. I like nature's ratios.
I'm fine with that. Keep your seeds with nature's ratios. Have good gene banks and make sure they stay alive and march on. But no, science is going to parse this plant into little bitty bits.
So if you were starting out today, what do you think you would like? Would you change anything? What do you think you'd do? Would you, and even this is something, for the listeners out there, if you were a young grower, a seed hunter or something, it sounds like science is really where you would probably pursue a little bit more or push people to pursue. Is that fair to say?
Oh yeah. The scientific method, pretty much whatever you do, it's a good way to come up with a believable outcome. But, no, things to do now with cannabis. Well, I wouldn't work on the Sinsemilla side.
Interesting.
I shouldn't say that. Except for rebuilding something from land races. That could be challenging. And I can give you a good example. The India Land Race Exchange guys, who I give a shout whenever I can. They do great work. And Trident Seeds, I think, is another avenue. You find them on the internet. But they've done some really cool stuff. They have a network of people, teams everywhere on the ground who collect land races, and they document them with nice photography, and they publish books.
Excellent.
I think they put out 5 or something, and they just had another one come out about Afghan land races. And hey, this is a key building block of everything modern people smoke these days.
Sure.
It's interesting to see photos of the people, but the plants in these environments that are so different from anywhere most of us live, at least.
Right. Well, it's just ability to thrive.
Arid, stark sort of places. And like the only green is these fields. And
crazy.
It's really good stuff. And their photography gets better. Their writing gets better every time. Can't say enough good stuff. They're
excellent.
They're into it, and they do it for love, and they have built from the land races they collect. They also do what everybody did back in the day, but they do it as breeders instead of people just being gardeners and having wonderful experiences and getting
Which there's nothing wrong with
starting
that.
what we have today. I mean, that's where it all came from.
Right.
They're doing that, but they're doing it as breeders. And it's interesting to see the blends of these land races and see the process start over again.
Sure.
And now people can just order landrace seeds. And it's a project, but what drives seed sales these days is hobbyists, not weed growers. Weed growers grow from cuttings.
Yeah.
You know, it's a horticultural exercise.
Yep.
And the agricultural exercise is dropped away, and it's the future, of course, because we really grow most of our cannabis drug cannabis as we do with fiber cannabis. And seed cannabis, we're going to grow them in fields. It's agriculture. But in the meantime, it's horticultural exercise for growing weed. So I would rebuild landraces into new varieties, your own personal thing. This is where you can get exactly what you want.
Right. Well, and I talk a lot about selecting in your environment, because if you're selecting where you're going to grow it, and there's a lot of selection pressures out there, which we talk a lot about, even, HPS as an example being a selection pressure. Phenotype is obviously genotype plus environment. You take a plant that was selected under HPS as the performer, you put it under LED. It's not saying it's going to be worse or better. It's saying it's going to be different, right? And that's just defining phenotype. Is there anything that you believe 30 years ago about cannabis that today you've specifically changed your mind about? Is there something that you go,
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. The main one that really pertains to the discussion in the industry and amongst aficionados these days is what makes you high. I mean, we got THC. Okay, that's the active molecule. Everybody has learned of its effects, but since the beginning, weeds and different hashish have been different from each other, and there was a lot of vagaries about that. First, hash and weed are a different process to get to roughly the same end. It's a high THC product. Seems to me, whatever. But along with that came other cannabinoids, and we've been aware of these other cannabinoids for a long time, since the 70s, really. And the assumption was that the levels of different cannabinoids is what made the different cannabis products and different varieties have differing effects. Pretty logical, because there's diversity in the chemotypes, the chemistry was well known for a long time. And we knew about terpenoids too. We knew that there was an essential oil that had an aroma, and there was characteristic cannabis aromas. And,
of course.
we knew all this for a long time too. But tying those two facts together, that the terpenes and other aromatic,
and the ratio is not the individual pieces.
The ratio is the chemotype, not just the individual molecules, but the ratios, relative amounts of each one of these. And that there's this ensemble effect, seems a more appropriate term to me. But
ensemble, I haven't heard that. I like that.
No, it's not,
it's not official yet, folks.
It's not a bunch of people following the THC molecule around, although that is what's going on too.
Wow, let's not even get into that.
It's a little more like listening to an orchestra.
Sure.
So that's
okay, I like that.
Was
Layers.
That's Lester Grinspoon's term, God rest his soul. It wasn't me.
Okay,
but,
all right. Credit where credit's due.
He always thought that was a better term. And I went along with it. I like that too. But anyway, we've come to this awareness now that it's not just the cannabinoids. It's these other things, which also are the brandable quotient to the whole
which is
botany.
a part of it. Yeah.
Is it a strawberry or is it a whatever? Is it gassy? Is it earthy? Is it all these wine taster kind of descriptors, which is great stuff. But that's driving branding, which goes along with sativa and indica again. That's effects branding. So that's the practical taxonomy of the commercial world.
Right. But I really like how you did put that that's not about the plant, it's about the effects. And I never really put that into, because that's really what it is. That's the separation. And even though at the same time, even if it's a sativa and it makes you a little racy, it might not do that to me. Your chemistry is different than mine, which is also a whole other layer, right?
See, here's what came with cuttings. We got narrowing of diversity. We got a preservation of a whole bunch of genes in every assortment you can think of almost, because we'll still come up with some different assortments here.
Somehow. Back cross it again.
That's what drives our industry, our consumer market. Once again, flavor of the month. But that cloning gave us that. Okay, making asexual propagation, making things by rooting cuttings instead of using seeds. So the variety's gone much to the benefit of the industry. But at the same time, we have uniformity in a way. We have a bunch of different flavors out there, but you and I can have the same experience with the same weed halfway across the world because you know somebody has the same cutting as the guy I know.
Sure.
So that's the same plant. So now it's like having one plant from seed that you didn't just smoke with your friends and neighbors one season for a garden.
Right.
It's there forever, theoretically. So it gave us better science because we have a common plant to work with instead of every single plant being different from the next one.
Over and over and over and over and over again.
So if you have an experience with growing it and somebody else has an experience of growing it and they come out different looking, then you know it's nurture, not nature in this case. You know, it's how you grew it or where it grew.
The phenotype, right? Genotype plus environment.
Yeah, exactly.
Yep.
And so and you really get to see those differences before. You just had to guess. It was on average population basis.
Sure.
You grew Michoacan, I grew Michoacan. They were roughly similar.
Right, but it was a lot of averages.
But you had individual plants that were different from the ones I had.
Sure.
So that helped. That gave us better science, and that helps us move forward, and because we have a common
ground to work off of.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So that's a benefit of the whole thing.
Is there, I always feel like every time somebody takes on something like this, any book, it always gets done, paper, whatever. Is there anything that you would change? And obviously you're updating it, but truly change, or that you just don't like that pissed you off about it?
Yeah, kind of. I mean, I wouldn't. The way books are done these days is remarkably different than 4 decades ago.
Understood.
I mean, first of all, there's no color in this book except the cover.
Right.
Now you have color all the way through books.
Gotcha. Yeah.
If you make sure they come out that way.
Right.
I mean, it's. Now you also have self-publishing. I am now my own publisher. So that's cool. It gives you a chance to really blow it or make something really nice. But yeah.
But once you put it in form, once you put it out in print, it's, once it's there, it's always
Books are cool. I'm a book fan. I think being read a book on audiobooks is great, although I don't do it, but I know
I think it's great. I don't do it either, but yeah. So,
but I like books, and I don't find enough time to read because I'm a laptop guy, and I read scientific papers all day long, and I haven't read myself to sleep in several years, but I used to do it every night.
Right, and you're getting. I'm assuming.
I still respect books. I like them.
I'm assuming you're getting a lot of dissertations sent to you these days. You probably used to be 1 or 2 or whatever, a little bit here or there. Now it's got to be kind of wild.
If you want, trying to finish this book, every day I look on the internet and I find new articles.
Jeez.
Every day. And they pop up too because the search engines understand your topic desires. So academia and ResearchGate and they pop up all the time. This book, I decided when I started, it doesn't have any references and citations. This book has almost 800 references.
It is referenced like crazy, to be honest.
Done in proper academic
so now
writing.
we got to the answer.
This one's done in proper academic writing too. This has a nice bibliography. This is the most important thing.
Right.
This, because people had to go back to the library.
Right.
If they wanted to pick up where I left off, all these years, you had to go back to the library and find these references and go from there. That ship left a long time ago. Now we have the internet. We have virtual libraries. We've got, I get my hands on things that just got scanned and put out, rare books.
Right.
And on the other end, 2025 publications that, in the first week of 2025, we had 2025 publications, several of them. And I don't search medical topics. That's more than half the stuff that comes out.
Right. So you're only sticking on the botanical
side. I'm trying to stick with botany. If I keep checking my internet every day, I'll never finish this book.
All right.
I mean,
stop checking your.
I'm serious. You have to keep up on things, but science progresses really fast.
So fast.
And I have to, at some point, just say, this is the way it is at this freeze frame of the process.
Sure.
And here's a book. But stay tuned for further developments. It's incredible. So there'll be a list of suggested reading because some people in particular have written some really great stuff. And if you want to go a little deeper pretty quickly, just go to those sources.
Well, and that's one thing.
The internet has them, run the person's name and PDF behind it, and you're going to get everything they ever wrote.
Right. Well, and that's one of the things I do like to present to our audience is just, opening up a topic, touching on several different things, and then say, hey, if something touches you, that's a rabbit hole you want to go down, go for it. You know what I mean? So I think that's a wonderful update and addition. If there was one strain that you had to save for future generations, what would it be?
Of what exists now?
Yeah, we could say in your lifetime.
Yeah, but it should be for something now. But you can always remember my favorite dogs too, but
we all do.
They're not around anymore. Today, I would like to see the land races. We know that they can disappear.
Yep.
For a whole bunch of different reasons. I'd like to see them collected, what's around now, and it's being done, but collected and multiplied and something concerted done with them, not just landrace seed collectors buying them and letting them die.
Right.
Which is actually what's going to happen to most of them. I'm being cynical, but it's the truth. There's more seeds dying right now in seed collections.
Sure.
It used to be the shoebox under the bed.
Right. Of course.
And a lot of the more recent landrace resurrections were done from the last remaining viable seeds in shoeboxes under people's beds.
Sure.
I mean, that's where they came from.
Right. That's where they came from.
They got hidden away.
Yeah.
But it'd be nice to see that done in a more concerted manner and made available to future generations. Seed banks are proprietary. There are very few that are actually public. And I will talk about this a bit in the book too, because it weighs on, that is a topic I will cover for sure. It's how should we collect, document, and preserve the variety we have now? For whom? That's the big question.
That's a big question.
We do have a few seed banks. They do not specialize in cannabis, except ones like in China and a few other ones. And the USDA is now busy with this again also. So we have good things in the works, but the big ones that get all the press, it's a membership system. Let's just leave it at that.
Yeah. Well said.
Yeah.
Well said. Well, and so it sounds like to me it's and no surprises here, but as opposed to, a single strain, let's call it, the desert island strain, you're really looking to keep a genetic base that's available for future preservation and utilization, not just
because
preservation.
I can't answer that question. That's the whole point.
Good.
You need to have your bases covered for things that people think of in the future.
Sure.
And they will. People are going to think of things tomorrow that maybe they might need some germplasm for at some point.
Right.
They need that diversity.
Yep.
There's really things lacking in breeding. Extending the range of cannabis farther, salt tolerance and drought tolerance. There is a lot of variation in both those traits.
Okay.
And you need variation to start breeding.
Yeah.
Certain things just don't have a lot of natural variation, but other traits really do. I mean, THC levels have been tripled over the average 30 years ago.
Sure. Fast.
Fiber levels in modern fiber varieties are more than double your landrace averages. So
no kidding.
Certain traits have really increased.
But again, some of those other traits like drought resistance, things like that, that's known to be in that landrace pool because they come from some of these stark areas.
There's plenty of variation there, and people are beginning to work with that. But that's the agronomic breeding that's required to make cannabis into a crop plant. Right. That's not just the horticultural freak.
Sure.
And that's a bit what seems to me has become. The selective pressures are short, fast, chunky, stinky,
oily,
and grows in a basement under lights.
Yeah.
I mean, that's it had to fit the space. It had to fit the market.
Yes.
It had to fit the prohibition profit margin incentive.
Yes.
It had to fit all these selective pressures that normally we don't think of it landrace development or even maize, because nobody, if you want to look up the maize breeding process, you can find out in a heartbeat. People have written volumes about it. But this has been a spontaneous development.
Right.
And we need to back up a little bit. We need to drive the car back out of the cul-de-sac and go explore some other roads in the neighborhood.
Right.
Go cruising.
And I mean, is that as far as a legacy, as far as what you want people to take from your work once it's all said and done? I mean, what do you want them to take away from it? Is it just a deeper understanding or a wonderment or something that spawns them to go further? It's like what Isaac Newton say, if I've seen farther than other people, it's because I stood on the shoulders of giants. So is that really what you see what I'm saying? Yeah,
I just want people to keep the quest, keep
the wonderment.
Keep asking questions.
There you go.
I mean, look, I didn't come up with this either, and I can't cite the person who did, but answers are satisfying. But it's the questions that are compelling. That's what keeps you looking for more answers. The answers are satisfying. They're great. And sometimes they can be profitable. They can be whatever you're looking for.
Sure.
And they need to be applied once you have them. That's the next step. But keep seeking answers to ever more interesting questions is all I can say. And I just smile because Mother Cannabis never stops throwing questions at you.
God, remember that quote, folks. That's a good one.
Now, this is a diverse path to go down. You can approach it, as I said before, at many different levels. But there's many questions to be answered, and every time you answer them, it seems like there's 2 or 3 more questions.
Or more, even that. Yeah, I always say, 1 answer, 10 more questions asked. Yeah. Well, first off, this has truly been an absolute pleasure. I do like to end these at times. Just this is your opportunity. If there's something you want to soapbox on, what really grinds Robert Connell Clarke's gears?
I think I just said it. Actually, no, I think that was it. I mean, it's otherwise, I just watch what's going on.
Right.
It's interesting.
Right.
I wish I had more years to watch. I'm not saying I relive anything, but it's going to be a long process. And I hope I can hang in there for a long time and see how it goes.
Sure.
It's gone faster than I ever would have predicted. I'm not trying to predict the future. I'd be in a different business, but it's really gone quick.
Yeah.
We've moved quick. And now that internationally it's changing, and it's all about the money. I mean, it's people have realized that after all, cannabis isn't that bad. It might even be helpful. The medicine side has really pushed cannabis in a good direction.
Yep.
That
opened up a lot of
medical awareness. That was the real first gateway jug. And that was
thank you, sir.
That was the good step in the right direction. That got people of all different age groups and interests involved.
Sure.
And wearing hemp didn't really do it.
Right.
But that's also a really good way forward. Mm-hmm. Eating hemp has done more than wearing it to push the plant into people's awareness.
Sure.
Hemp seeds are super good food. They are a superfood.
Yep.
And breeding can be done there too.
Yep.
That'll be very interesting. But it's always potential. So
well, it's nothing but potential, and that's why I've always said, especially in plants, it's there's a heck of a lot more that we don't know about them than we do know about them. They're very mysterious. They make their own food. They've always been fascinating to me. Obviously, cannabis is a passion, of mine as well. If people want to get a hold of you, ask questions. I don't know if you want to give out a website. Do you have anything like that? Where can people find you, or are you just mystery man?
No, I'm gonna just stay private for now. I'm not.
Cool. Good.
I'm not a big fan of social media. It's just too time consuming, to be honest.
Yeah, and it is. I mean, it's a whole. You got to feed that beast.
I don't do it much. My partner has started a website that's interesting. It's I've collected a lot of textiles and baskets and things over the years. I'm the only son of a seamstress. The only child of the seamstress.
Right.
My mom really needed a daughter. But anyway, I ended up with a textile appreciation. Subliminally, somehow she did this. So I've ended up collecting textiles, hemp and other things my whole life pretty much.
Right.
So being a guy who's getting older, I don't need it all. So my partner and I, she has put together a wonderful website. It's called Skoglund and Clarke. She's the Skoglund, I'm the Clarke. And that you can find. And I wouldn't contact me about my personal side there, but that's coming up. And when I have this new book out, there'll be a way to...
And I know you're going to be out and about once you're getting there.
Communicate more with people. I just want to finish the book first. And I'm always a communicative guy. I don't really hide, but...
he doesn't bite, folks.
But I do want to... I want to hear what people are doing.
Yeah.
There's a lot of good stuff going on, and you don't get it all from the library.
Right. Well,
That's
again, the anecdata. There's a lot of basement science that's gone on. Again, an absolute pleasure here from Amsterdam, our temporary jug den for the day.
Yeah, there you go.
And again, so much of a pleasure.
Yeah, good, man.
Really
Thanks
good talking to
me.
you.
Super
Hopefully
good.
we can do this again. And until next time, guys, thanks for watching.
Peace and love.